Hello, welcome to another video by Rick Miracle, me, in my series Freemasonry and Satanism. A continuation of this book, The Case for UFOs, the Allende Letters, in the Vero edition, Morris Jessup. It's been an interesting book. Not too many books have I made part 5. This will be part 5. May wind up being a part 6. Because I think it's important to try to wrap our heads around history. A lot of people, like a video I was watching this morning, the speaker, Tom Cole, I believe, a serious student of history, the Illuminati, Freemasons, Rhodes Scholars, British Empire, the American independence, and so much more. And he was trying to rationalize that how people lump the Council of Foreign Relations, the Illuminati, the Jesuits, the Freemasons, and all these conspiracy theories into one grouping. He said is doesn't give it justice to history. And I'm thinking, wait a minute. Everything from witchcraft, Kabbalah, Rosicrucian, the Vatican front lawn, downtown city squares, gargoyles on buildings, all of these groups, Secret Mystery School of Babylon, a coin termed by William Cooper in his book, Beware a Paled Horse. Go look it up if you haven't read the book. And some of his videos on YouTube, the Mystery Schools of Babylon, William Cooper. But what makes me think all these groups are one is the symbols they use. 5-pointed star, obelisk, lions, dragons, stars around with a circle around it, witchcraft. So much more. The all-seeing eye. And then, of course, they have the hand gestures. This is the devil sign. The 3 6s. Movie stars covering the eye. So what's behind this? What is this return to the golden age? What's it have to do with Jerusalem, Israel, Palestine? Murdering all the Arabs. Why did the Vatican and the kings and queens all over Europe have 8 crusades over 300 years into the Middle East, the land of Canaan, Palestine, to retake the Holy Land, Jerusalem, and all the other castles up and down the coast? Were they part of the Holy Land also? Was it a holy thing to do? To murder all of the Arabs so that the blood was knee-deep? Just saying, something's weird. When they went into South America, carrying the banner with the cross on it in the name of Jesus, slaughtering the natives, stealing the gold, destroying all their religious artifacts. Strange. Library of Alexandria. Why did they have to burn all those books of history? So here I am talking about aliens and UFOs. So why don't I start out with something that might be appropriate for the conversation I just had. Here on page 122, the ruins of Baalbek lie in the northeast of Beirut, between the eastern end of the Mediterranean Sea and the northern end of the Syrian desert. The ruins of Baalbek, B-A-A-L-B-E-K, are the most majestic and the most notable of the Earth's ancient structures. I've mentioned these many times because they're just an insane thing that they did, we can't do today. Stones larger than school buses were quarried and moved for miles uphill, stacked upon one another. We can't do that today. How crazy is that? Anyways, the most majestic and most notable of the Earth's ancient structures. Okay, who did it? They have caused more speculation among scientists generally and archaeologists in particular than any other group of ruins on Earth. For it is usually conceded that there has never been found a single vestige of information intimating or showing when or by what people they were created. So anyways, Morris Jessup says, I have several descriptions of these ruins before me. He's going to use one by Mark Twain. His description is the one I have selected to use. Mark Twain here speaking or writing. At 11 o'clock, our eyes fell upon the walls and columns of Baalbek, a notable ruin whose history is a sealed book. It has stood there for thousands of years, the wonder and admiration of travelers. Who built it is a question that may never be answered. One thing is sure, though, such grandeur of design, such grace of execution, as one sees in the temples of Baalbek, have not been equaled or even approached in any other work of man's hand that has ever been built within the last 20 centuries. And you can see here that the aliens, if that's who edited this book, highlighted that sentence of Morris Jessup's as if to point it out. Remember, there were three different entities, apparently Jemmy, Mr. A, and Mr. B, who made markings up of Jessup's book, sent it to the Department of Navy. Here they are on the bottom there, with the different kinds of underlining. Actually, in Jessup's book, they used different color pens. Highlighting or underline some of Jessup's sentences as if to point them out. The great temple of the sun, the temple of Jupiter, and several smaller temples are clustered together in the midst of the Syrian villages, miserably dirty. They look strange enough in such plebeian company. These temples are built upon massive substructures that might support a world almost. The material used its blocks of stone, as large as an omnibus. Very few of them are smaller than a carpenter's tool chest. These structures are traversed by tunnels of masonry through which a train of cars might pass. With such foundation as these, it is little wonder that Baalbek has lasted so long. The Temple of the Sun is nearly 300 feet long and 160 feet wide. It has 54 columns around it, but only 6 are standing now. And I'm only reading my highlighted portions as usual. These columns and their extambulatures, however you say that, together are 90 feet high, a prodigious altitude for shafts of stone to reach. Pillars among which you are not standing, and find that they are 8 feet thick. With them lie beautiful capitals, apparently as large as small cottages, and also single slabs of stone, superbly sculptured, that are 4 to 5 feet thick, and would completely cover the floor of any ordinary parlor. The alien says, don't know, surely not writing of LMs, were and are all telepaths. So these LMs, Lemurians, I suppose, are telepaths, according to this book. Moving on. One of 9 columns stands almost uninjured. They're 65 feet high and support a sort of porch or roof. This porch roof is composed of tremendous slabs of stone which are so finely sculptured on the undersides that the work looks like a fresco from below. While the temple, within the temple, the ornamentation was elaborate and colossal. What a wonder of architectural beauty and grandeur this edifice must have been when it was new, and what a noble picture and its stellar companion with the chaos of mighty fragments scattered about them, made in the moonlight. So it'd probably be a good idea to just go on your computer and put in Temple of Baalbek or Stones of Baalbek, B-A-A-L-B-E-K, and see the wonder. You got a guy standing next to one of the stones and he looks like an ant. Who built them? That is our quest, to try to answer some questions. And yet, these sculptured blocks are trifles in size compared with the rough-hewn stones that form the sign veranda or platform which surrounds the great temple. One stretch of that platform, composed of only 3 stones, is nearly 300 feet length. They are 13 feet square. 2 of them are 64 feet and 69 feet long. They are built into the massive wall 20 feet above the ground. Wow. Well, moving on here. This enormous block lies there squared and ready for the builder's hands. A solid mass 14 feet by 17 feet and 70 feet long. 70 feet long by 14 feet by 17 feet. Wow. Certainly bigger than a bus, taller than a bus, 17 feet, wider than a bus, 14 feet, longer than a bus, 70 feet. But an RV is like 34 feet long. So it would be like 2 RVs parked in front of one another. Oh my. 1 stone. This was still at the quarry and had never been moved, but somebody had cut it out. One could use the same words almost to describe the massive unfinished stones, statues, left in the quarries on Easter Island. Something sudden terminated the work of Easter Island and Baalbek. So these great works were done, obviously by seriously intelligent beings, and apparently everything ceased almost all at once. Easter Island, Peru, Baalbek, Egypt, all with screaming evidence of sudden, overwhelming disaster disappearing, happening to a race of beings who handled rocks weighing hundreds and hundreds of tons. The alien says they should see the Atlantic chain cities, great undersea metropolises. So the aliens are saying under the Atlantic, we have chained cities, great undersea metropolises. Moving on with Jessup here. There is little in Baalbek, Easter Island, Peru, or Egypt to show a grandeur development of so advanced a culture or civilization. They, or at least their megalithic stonework, appeared to have been ready-made, as though a colony was set up directly, complete, a going concern. So apparently it looks like some intelligent entities came to that area, well, I guess all over Earth. If we remember Easter Island, Peru, the Machu Picchu lines, the Sphinx, the pyramids, and many other monuments all over the world. Even in that one book, Transylvania Sunrise by Peter Moon, I went over, apparently in Romania, an underground facility even with force fields, and the chairs and tables a human being couldn't sit in, they could have been made for a giant. I read and report, but I think if we remember all this stuff as we're looking at other things that the powers that be owned media, TV, movies, newspapers, news, magazines, are telling us, we might well remember some of the stuff in this book. So maybe we can bypass all the deception. Alright, it says here, in both cases, Easter Island, Baalbek, work stopped suddenly, and apparently the forced lift for the 1,200-ton stones was lost somehow. And the alien underlined that. And now the alien says, get this, the bombardment of which the East Coast shows good signs even yet, the Grand Bank, circular swamps, etc. Another, the alien says, largest would have been cut into regular building sizes, or else it had a twin to be marched to. So they keep talking about these, whoever edited this book, that there was some gigantic war on Earth, bombardment by some kind of alien craft we don't have today, with some kind of force field technologies that could literally crack the Earth, cause upheavals, catastrophes. And as we see in this video, as I continue on in this book, there's plenty of evidence of that. Moving on, it seems necessary to conclude that while massive stone work was in progress all over the world, for which we have to include India, Tibet, Polynesia, sources of power were limited in number and available to a few important projects. It seems that such levitators disappeared suddenly and unexpectedly. Where to? Asked Jessup. The alien says they went home. Just saying. Jessup says, what kind of power was this levitation agency? And one of the aliens, which one? Mr. B highlighted that sentence. What kind of power was this levitation agency? To move a 1,200-ton block. The alien says, you can see where it's highlighted here, and these proved inadequate. Theory. True, prime mover caused gravity node or minor strength or major, thus gravity didn't exist upon these stones. So I don't know if you know what a node is, but when you have a sine wave, the node would be the 0 point from when it goes above, like 0 volts, 12 volts, 0 volts, to 12 negative volts to 0. The 0 point would be a node. And in between the, for example, radio stations, 105, 102, if you had a spectrum analyzer and an antenna outside, and you would see one station, the power peak like that, another station, a power peak like that, but in between would be no peaks, which would be 0 nodes, 0 transmitted energy nodes. And apparently between the Earth and the Moon, with the gravitational forces, in the middle of those is a neutral point called a node. So apparently these node places, when you create artificially on stone, with some kind of maybe electromagnetic beam, you make it neutral to gravity with the node. Maybe this is how spaceships fly. Anyways, apparently then you can just pick up the stone with 2 or 3 guys that weighs 1,200 tons because you've rendered it weightlessness with the energy beamed at it. Just theorizing from what I'm reading here. I have used the word levitation as a substitute for power or force. Jessup says, I have suggested that flying saucers use some means of reacting with the gravitational field. Same thing I'm saying. In this way, they could apply accelerations or lifting forces to all particles of the body inside and outside simultaneously. I believe that this same or similar force was used to move stones in very ancient times. I believe the source of this lifting or levitating power was lost suddenly. The alien says, all comes under one principle, just applied differently. Now, as an electronic technology educated technician, me, worked at a major aerospace company 10 years, and as even a young man in high school, college, I've always been fascinated with gravity, anti-gravity, and alternate energy sources other than gas and oil and nuclear power, which, by the way, is how I got into this research in the beginning. I didn't know my research was going to take me in the direction of all the conspiracy theory material, hence Freemasonry and Satanism. But when one considers that these Freemasons and Illuminati, Zionists, Jesuits, Vatican, and all these elites have all kinds of secrets they don't share with the rest of us, keeping the UFO information secret, and secret lodges with secret hand signs and secret symbols, even in all the corporation logos using the sun and the sixes, like CERN with the 3 sixes, or the statue of Shiva out front, the goddess of destruction. All these people behind the scenes running our world, causing all the economic chaos and destruction, they have control over this information. Wouldn't we, the people, like to know what's in the basement of the Vatican or other places in those warehouses of the government, like they show us on the Indiana Jones movie, or crates with all these secrets stored and locked away? So maybe we could pick out a little of that information up reading this material. At least I seem to be picking up some information. We believe, in short, that this lifting engine was a spaceship, probably of vast proportions, that it brought colonists to various parts of the earth, probably from other terrestrial areas, and that it supplied the heavy lift power for erecting the great stones, and that it was suddenly destroyed or taken away. Such a hypothesis would underwrite all the movements of stone over which archaeologists and engineers have puzzled. So he's saying it's a possible solution to a question that these people have had for thousands of years. The alien says, yet Mu has left some traces. Artifacts and highly civilized remnants undersea. So apparently there's a lot of information undersea that hasn't been discovered yet. Jessup says, one thing does and is logical. Collision from outside bodies striking the earth. It is the only common denominator for our broadest and most basic problems of anthropology. The alien says, laughing, he's hit it. So if the alien says that's what it says here, he hit it, I guess maybe I should read it again. One thing does and is logical. Collision from outside bodies striking the earth. It is the only common denominator for our broadest and most basic problems of anthropology. Well, I hope I'm reading this well enough for my viewers to understand the gravity of this if it's true. And on the other hand, if it's not true, who's fabricating this kind of stuff in all those UFO books I have? And when you do look at these ancient sites in the hieroglyphics, why are those the same symbols be used? All those symbols are used by the Freemasons, Illuminati, witchcraft, Jesuits, Zionists, etc. Secret mystery school of Babylon, occult groups. Is all this something biblical? Is it reptilian, a satanic thing, beings? When the devil, Satan, took Jesus up to the top of a mountain and said, "But get down on one knee to me, and I will give you all of this." So I guess earth was Satan's to give away. Not trying to get off on the religious avenue here. Just a scientist examining all the information. And Jesus said, "I don't need any of this. This is not of my Father's home. In my Father's home there are many mansions." So apparently Jesus indicated that where he's from and where he's going is someplace else other than here. And apparently earth belongs to these beings. Apparently Satan, reptilians, 1/3 of the angels cast out of heaven. What is heaven? Is it another dimension where beings are? Anyways, just food for thought. Back to Morris Jessup. Let us merely state that our tenet, or the point of inserting this discussion into the general concept, is to indicate that there was long ago a very advanced culture. I'll agree with that. Even when you read the Bible, and Jesus and 2 of the apostles walked up to some mountain and appeared 2 beings, Isaiah and Moses, people who were long dead, by the way. And they were kind of glowing like a people, like spiritual beings. Anyways, the 2 apostles were a little embarrassed, and they said, "We can leave you alone for a little while." Anyways, all of a sudden above them appeared a cloud, and a voice came from the cloud that said, "This is my son, for whom I am proud. Listen to him." That's in St. Mark and St. Matthew. I'm reading St. Luke right now. I will be doing another video, series number 72, part 3. And so I pay attention to these details, these paranormal healings and casting out demons and clouds with voices coming from them, where throughout history, apparently clouds have been the vehicle that big spaceships, motherships, and other ships used to disguise themselves. So what is that saying about the Bible? That history that's documented. Voice from the cloud. "This is my son for whom I am very proud. Listen to him." And there was Isaac and Moses alive, almost like some kind of alien beings. You could recognize them who they were, but they weren't human looking. Even Moses, when he went up on the mountain, after helping the Hebrew people escape Egypt slavery, and he brought the 2 stones, the 10 Commandments down, he was all glowing and had changed with his interfacing with apparently God. So you keep that in the back of your mind when you're reading these books, and it kind of makes some sense. So there was a very advanced culture long ago, which could, and almost certainly did, invent a means of levitation and space mobility. The alien says, had Faraday concerned himself with the magnetic field surrounding his electrical current, today would have already reached the outermost parts of our galaxy. Their Jemmy was given the results of what would have been possible had Dr. Faraday done as suggested. Other page. The SMs and LMs fought using small asteroids. So apparently these aliens can fight each other using asteroids. We have no inclination to fare forth to other things and other ways. Ours is way of life, time-proven and happy. We have nothing, own nothing, except our music and our philosophy, and are happy. These are the aliens speaking, or these beings who apparently seem to think they know more than Mr. Morris Jessup, and edited his book. Any action has a reaction. Thus, if something pulls upward, it also pushes downward. Such a tremendous force could cause sheets of diamonds to be made in saucer-shaped, to divert cosmic rays. It could cause new metals to be made or tougher ones, divert rays, and etc. It could cause Earth to become rock with a few minutes. It could change a whole world or civilization just by its potential. And it does too. So again, it's just a curiosity for me to wonder about this technology. Maybe I could pick up something here and do some experiments. Apparently, one of the things they said here, that if you took 264 pole magnets, bar magnets, and put them on a big sheet of steel, it would be weightless. Moving on here, a series of jumps, always mathematically 8 1/2 inches. And the alien says, marker idling. So there's something called the devil hoofprints, apparently across the field and across the driveway and over the house, on top of the house, across the waterway on the other side, in a straight line, as if it was a one-legged mule, for example. Every 8 1/2 inches was a footprint in a straight line. So it couldn't be a two-legged human, they wouldn't be in a straight line, or a four-legged animal, or even a two-legged bird, but these were exactly behind each other in a straight line for miles. They look like this. It was an incident that fascinated the world, lots of investigation. They called it the devil hoofprints. The aliens say it was a measure marker, something from an aircraft. I guess they measure distances and things on the ground that somebody had left on idling. Another statement by the editors, aliens or people from the secret mystery school of Babylon, or people behind the scenes, Shambhala. Marker is like low-power stonecutter. The witnesses have already quoted said that the marks can be traced in some instances over the roof of houses, hay ricks, and very high walls, one 14 feet high, without displacing the snow on either side. So these measure markers, wherever they went, this beam of energy, every 8 1/2 inches, made these marks right over stone walls and everything. Moving on. As high walls, hay ricks, and houses were no obstacle to the onward march of these tracks, so neither was a great stretch of water. So apparently the marks were plugged into the ground right up to the banks of a river. And on the other side, they were picked back up. When we consider the distance that must have been gone over to have left these marks, I may say that almost every garden, doorstep, through extensive woods of Lescumby, upon commons and enclosures and farms, the actual progress must have exceeded 100 miles. All right, further description of those hoof marks. The devil's footprints. Apparently some kind of device used by these craft or motherships when they enter our atmosphere and fly around to take soil samples or do measuring of Earth. It said they removed the snow as clearly as if it was branded with a hot iron. The single prints in a straight line exactly in front of each other. The tracks extended 100 miles or more across an inlet of the sea without deviation or interruption, passed over and on buildings and walls. So it certainly wasn't an animal. These holes in the snow were made with mechanical precision by something mechanical. Something mechanical passed over Devon in the air. The alien says, mechanical, not precisely, but slightly. F for force. So it's some kind of energy beam force. I'm just reading my highlighted portions. The tracks looked more as if they had been burned into the snow. Something reached, projected, or emanated from this contrivance at regular times because the contraption was moving with uniform velocity and thus instrumentally of contact made regular spaced marks. The alien says, on the head. So apparently the alien is acknowledging that Morris Jessup's theorizing from reading about this situation is exactly correct. Now we note that this last thing did not pack snow into the tracks, and perhaps removed it instead. Anything besides a ray of some sort, it doesn't seem too likely. We have advocated levitation, Morris Jessup saying this, as an explanation before. Thus the levitation of a few snow crystals in trivial as compared to the kicking, squirming body of Oliver Lurch or the 1,200-ton blocks at Bellback. Remember earlier in my earlier videos on this book, there were people who stepped out of the house to get a pail of water, and I guess were buying a tractor, according to the aliens, was sucked up into the air, crying for help, and all of his friends and family come running out of the farmhouse, and they can't see him, but from above they can hear, help me, and apparently something had scooped him up. The alien says, close, someone is telepathing to his inferior, receiver. Moving on. The alien says, test should show emanations, else the measurer was only idling his marker. The other alien says, or unless new electrical power is close by there. All right, moving on. Cup marks are strings of cup-like impressions in rocks. Sometimes there are rings around them, and sometimes they have semicircles. They have been found in America, Great Britain, France, Algeria, Palestine. So I'm just reading my highlighted portions. You get the idea. There are 24 cups varying from 1 to 1.5 to 3 inches in diameter, arranged approximately in straight lines on the Witch's Stone near Ratho, Scotland. The alien says, picture coming to strange, unexplored, never seen planet. Not new photography or cartography, so must mark it indebitably. No. So the alien says you come to a strange planet, Earth, and this is how you take some measurements and survey the property. Jessup says, but where the cut marks appear in stone, we get the impression that a more powerful ray was used, capable of disintegrating or fusing rocks, and that the flying gimmick was hovering over a small area. This hovering would account for the cut marks appearing in clusters. And the alien highlighted that. The alien says here in another sentence, gravity field not steady causes wobble. Jessup says, I am reminded here of the pigs somewhere in the French-Canadian wilderness, which were killed by circular burn spots of totally unexplained origin. So I guess if one of these measure markers that could burn a hole in snow, surveying the earth, were to actually hit some animals, pigs, they were found dead with these marks on them. The alien says, or underlines what Jessup says, some hints might be gained by studying all the places where cut marks are found and determining whether these locales have any prominent features in common. So the alien underlined Jessup's sentence, and then the alien adds, one must have some permanent way of finding one's way in life's necessities and pleasures. So apparently they use these markers or measuring instruments maybe to find resources, minerals, water. Moving on. I just want to add, this series is called Freemasonry and Satanism. And as I keep saying, somebody might ask, well, what does aliens and UFOs and all that have to do with that? Well, I am reminded that these people who rule our world control the newspapers, the scientists, the educational system, the government, the police, the military. America's secret establishment, as we have learned, the Skull and Bones is one organization. They would know, these intellectuals would have had first-hand evidence, just like they do with the men in black suits when things happen these days and the recorded events of the crashed spaceships like Roswell and many other instances. These people in the know who control our world have the information. They're making decisions. So it might behoove us to figure out what they do know and what's causing them or who's causing them to make certain decisions, particularly right now with this New World Order, New Age, overthrowing all the countries throughout much of the world. But in particular, since 9/11, all through the Middle East, slaughtering the Arabs and displacing the other ones to Europe and the United States, economically crushing the United States, sending all the manufacturing jobs to China and other places, and apparently wanting to bring the communist-style dictatorship and eliminate Christianity and any religion. It just makes me wonder. I go scratch my head and go, why? What's the purpose? Are these things I'm reading here real? Those monuments all over the world are real. So it might just behoove we the people to become a little bit like the intellectuals and ponder this stuff and watch my videos or go get the books. I'm just trying to give somebody a jump start on this. I've spent a lot of years. I don't think people have a lot of years and can invest a lot of years. They're struggling with their job and their life to get by. So I do this and add my 2 cents. Don't believe everything I'm saying. Take some notes. Get a little notepad. Look up some stuff. Let your curiosity get to you. Okay, moving on. Have you heard of the vitrified forts of Scotland, Ireland, Brittany, and Bohemia? So when I'm reading this stuff, I read about Bohemia. And when I'm reading about this stuff, I'm reading about places that were the symbols for the Freemasons and Illuminati, the secret mystery school of Babylon, Rosicrucian, Kabbalah, witchcraft, Zionism, the Jesuits, the Vatican, the obelisk. I think the two are connected. So they have vertified forts of Scotland, Ireland, Brittany, and Bohemia. So the alien says, from the below, he may have surmised that there were 2 types of people at war with one another. Can't say for sure. Moving on to Jessup's conversations, these vertified forts seem almost to surround England. And since some are in Brittany and Bohemia, one wonders if England at that time was connected to the mainland of Europe. The alien says, this is interesting, true. So apparently at one time England was connected to the mainland. Archaeologists postulate that these incredible ancient people built vast fires to vertify the stone forts and cement them together by melting them externally. The alien says, force cutter full blast. So the aliens apparently on these craft have some kind of energy beams called a force cutter. Jessup says, but the singular fact of these vertified forts is that the stones are vertified in streaks, as if special blast had struck or played upon them. The alien says, bravo, he's hit it on the nose. So Jessup's using his God-given brain and analyzing the facts recorded in documents and magazines and newspapers throughout history, and the aliens are editing his notes. Next thing the alien says, ancient wars too were the cause by the force cutter. So if you read anything on the Atlantis, which I have an impressive collection of Atlantis books, just thought I'd take an intermission here and look at some of these books. Atlantis, Fact or Fiction? This is an interesting book. Atlantis, it's a kind of an antique, as you can see. Look at the symbol on there. And some of the symbols, a lot of this research. The Mayan Indians, up stuff in Egypt. Atlantis, the antediluvian world. Again, comparing a lot of artifacts from all over the world with all kinds of strange symbols. So what is history all about? What's it have to do with the goings-on today? Atlantis, the 8th continent. This was my favorite book here. If you can get any book, just go on a used bookstore and try to find one of these for a couple dollars. It'll change your world when you find out all the connections. You're thinking. It's not what we think. Another one I have. Just saying, there's more to reality than we all know. Least we forget the series is Freemasonry and Satanism. And the people running our world, the secret government, is well aware of a lot of things we're not aware of. And technologies. That's concerning. Moving on, archaeologists postulate that these incredible ancient people built vast fires to virtuify the stone force and cement them together by melting them externally. As I said earlier, the alien says, force cutter full blast. Ancient wars, too, were the cause by the force cutters. Alright, and only streaks in certain forts are vitrified. The alien says, stone cut with P at full power of F cutter, force cutter. Another of the aliens says, upon review, I believe this man may be being illuminated telepathically. Somebody, LMs or SMs, is making him right about that which he sees in his head and has checked upon to verify. That somebody wants to come out of hiding, not be misunderstood or feared, but wants to coexist in a very peaceful fashion, or is planning on making the Gayor, I think they call us the Gayor, G-A-Y-O-R-E, their allies for war. If this is so, then only the SMs would want war. They are immature, and only they are so immature as to desire war. One planet in the galaxy means nothing to them. All they foster is war as a game to alleviate their boorish, unplayful, and unhappy existence. The non-philosophicism of human and SM equals destruction. Well, that should be concerning. We're all seeing that our world right now, apparently the powers that be are planning for World War III. And the technology and weaponry is off the chart. Very few people are really aware what they have now. It's insane. So moving on to another topic in this book. Disappearing planes. We shall now devote too much time. We shall not devote too much time to disappearing planes, as it is a modern phenomenon by definition. And we are building our case for the UFOs from a wealth of historical information. So apparently, insomuch as these disappearances relate directly to our thesis of intelligence in space contrivances, which kidnap human beings either to supply food or experiments of a nature beyond our ability to grasp, they bear mention. The alien says, for progenation. So apparently they're abducting people to breed with. That's what it says here. If we could establish this system of running conversation, we might get some clues as to the destroyers of these ships and the captors of their crews and passengers. So as I said earlier, you know, may not be the most exciting information here to review, but I think it's important and worth the time to understand these historic facts, current and historic. By contrast, the sea disappearances with the C-46 with 32 Marines aboard, the wreckage was found, but never any bodies. The alien says, God help the LMs. The Marines have landed. So apparently these people editing Jessup's book also have a sense of humor. Jessup says the unexplained and unannounced crashes of planes over land are numbered in dozens, but these are crashes, not disappearances. It is the rule and not the exception that the major catastrophes come without warning. Whatever causes the crash seems to cut off communication instantaneously. No survivors and, at least one case, no bodies. So you would think if there was some problem with these planes on these many disappearances with radio technology, that at least they could get the message, SOS message out. But apparently they just vanish. It is one thing for a solitary plane to vanish from above the sea without trace or without signals being heard. It is quite another thing for 5 military planes flying as a group, all with full crew and radio, to pass silently and irrevocably from human ken. So they just disappear. Even groups of planes just disappear. No radio contact. Now that's just pretty much not possible. If you think about it, even if they were fired on by another craft, a storm, a meteor, when the crash was recovered, they would have found dead bodies. For the benefit of the public, the Navy pointed out tersely that the Avenger bomber was noted for its buoyancy. So if these particular ships were to have run out of gas, they're quite capable of landing on the water and floating. In similar emergencies, such planes had always remained afloat long enough for the crews to launch their life rafts, often without getting their feet wet. One of the first rescue craft to roar off the water in search of the missing flyers was a Navy PBM, a huge Martin Marietta Mariner bomber with a crew of 13 that had been trained for just such work. This plane, too, disappeared without a trace. How could 5 bombers, each with its own crew, radio facilities, disappear from the face of the earth? And how about the PBM Martin Mariner bomber with a crew of 13? I think this was off the coast of Key West, north of Jacksonville. Northward to Jacksonville. The alien says, LM investigations of technical leaps and bounds of the Gayor. So they do call we humans G-A-Y-O-R-I. In past 10 years, being distorted to show cause for hostile intent. So I guess they're worried about our technological advancements. And this not so curiosity is sign of intelligence, and LMs have this in overabundance. Sorry to say, LMs regard humans just as humans have chosen to be regarded as just so much valueless animal forms of life. So apparently these aliens think of us basically just as animals. Sworn to destructiveness ends and follow these passions, that negative idea of higher life form possibility to them. So they just don't see us as intelligent beings. In July 1952, a strange silvery object was seen high in the sky over San Anselmo, California. 5 minutes later, there was an unexplained crash of a quite airworthy plane 5 miles away. So did the alien craft shoot down a plane? Or was it electromagnetics controls interfering with the plane's operation? As we all know, a lot of people in vehicles, when approached by a flying saucer, the vehicle would just shut down. I've got plenty of books on UFOs, as I've shown in my previous videos. In March 1952, a case-hardened British fighter pilot, Wing Commander J. Baldwin, was flying a jet plane for meteorological and reconnaissance purposes over Korea. He flew into a cloud and didn't come out again. About this time, a U.S. carrier in Korean waters had sighted a strange object in the skies. Well, there's a coincidence. So the plane goes in a cloud, doesn't come out again. No crash debris, but they had sighted a strange object in the sky. On June 9th, 1952, British Air Vice Marshal Archley set out in an amply fueled meteor jet from Suez to Cyprus. Nothing more has been seen or heard of him without a trace. February 2, 1953, a York transport aircraft with 33 passengers and a crew of 6 vanished over the Atlantic. And this again in the Erie region of the Gulf and the Caribbean. The list of disasters to jet planes is long. The list of explanations is short. Pilots surviving crashes on whole squadrons have been silenced. It was explained that all 4 ran out of fuel at one time. The alien says, not so. They were pushed down. I guess one of those attractors on these alien craft can levitate somebody off the ground or pick big stones or push objects, control them. The constellation over Brazil, the DC-3 in Lake Michigan, more planes disappearing. In August 2, 1947, the British South American airline plane Las Castriane Stardust mysteriously vanished on a flight over the Andes. Here's the funny part. 5:45 p.m., she sent out a signal stating her time of arrival, that is just 4 minutes from the airport, almost within sight of the control tower, when she just disappeared. They did lots of research, searching the area, and found nothing. That plane carried a crew of 5 men, and there were 6 passengers. The pilot, Captain Cook, had crossed the Andes 8 times as second pilot. 4 minutes from the landing strip, what happened? The alien says, Static Gaelic for stranger to world was Cook, raised around Gaelic folks when a child, where he heard the Stendic. So apparently Captain Cook said only one word on the radio, Stendic, S-T-E-N-D-E-C. So the aliens say it's a Gaelic word. Cook was talking to nearby and closing in LM ship. So apparently one of these big motherships, the LM ships, was approaching this jet plane, and Steinbeck said fearfully, and said it rapidly, becoming Stendic, which means stand off. So the radio pilot said only one word, stand off. You bloody Stendicer or Stendischen or even Standisher is an occasional oath of Scots brooder. They're just commenting on the word. The aliens are commenting on the word. It is used only to imply the very worst sort of mysterious doing person. So I guess, when would you use the word for somebody to stand off? I guess you'd be excited and angry. Yes, could have been an LM aboard, and he said stand back very fast. In 1947, an American Superfortress bomber strangely vanished when 100 miles off Bermuda. A Pan American Airlines, a Constellation with 40 people aboard, was on her way from South Africa to New York on June 20, 1951. 15 minutes out, with no trouble to report, and anticipating an eventless landing, the giant craft disappeared, without a trace of a record, no outcry from its radio. The alien says, men frozen, helpless, are good prey. So apparently they have some kind of technology just to freeze everything. I submit that these disappearances are in greater number than those of the past. Disappearances of people, etc. Because our air age is proving of great interest to our space neighbors. Also, we are infinitely more aware of such disappearances. The same reasoning, of course, applies to the increase of UFOs cited since the advent of the air age and use of radar. All right, moving on. Jessup says, I suggest further that these disappearances are but more kidnappings by the space contrivances. Are there any other explanations which satisfy all the questions? He goes on to say, on a calm but overcast Sunday on August 1942, two experienced naval officers, Lieutenant Cody and Ensign Adams, in fine spirits, took off on an anti-submarine patrol in a U.S. Navy blimp, an L-8. As they flew low to look for submarines, not far from San Francisco, they saw an oil slick, which might denote a submarine. So there were boats down on the water, and to the surprise of everyone, the airship neither circled nor bombed. Instead, she shot upwards and disappeared into the clouds. The ship was not seen again by the watchers in the patrol and fishing boats, and her happy crew was not heard of again by anybody. The L-8 rose to 2,500 feet and drifted for 2.5 hours, and then came down on a California beach, almost striking two fishermen, who grabbed her towing lines and tried to hold her. They looked inside the gondola and found it empty. So Lieutenant Cody did radio in, am investigating oil slick, and then there was nothing. And the aliens underlined another comment made by Jessup. The craft merely shot upward into the overcast. Cody and Adams must have disappeared, just disappeared, for keeps, with at least a dozen or two interested observers watching every move of their airship. Why and where to? The alien says, will remain in stasis neutral, living with the LMs and being fed by them until they are of no use, and no further info can be gotten from the LM's use, a mental probe. So apparently they were captured by these aliens, LMs. Now something like in a calligraph saves much time and sweat with subjects whose PSI factoring, so some kind of lie detector machine, or extrasensory perception is too low for telepathy. So apparently these beings can abduct people and actually put them in a different state, other than this normal state of awareness I'm in right now talking. You can go into this stasis neutral situation, living with the LMs. So the LMs are in this stasis neutral, another dimension maybe, and being fed by them until they are of no use. And no further information can be gotten from the LM's use. All right, another topic. Followers of the flying saucers are well acquainted with the Foo Fighters, fireballs and lights. reported so extensively during World War II. Because they are modern and because their presence is so undeniable, established, and their activities so well catalogued, we shall do nothing with them more other than a brief mention in the general category of lights and fireballs. The Foo Fighters seem, however, to be of a slightly different genre from the usual UFO lights. Foos are usually reddish and yellowish, soft and diffuse, unattached to any tangible object, extremely mobile. UFOs, on the other hand, have a hard bluish white lights, are brilliant, functional, and flickering. The alien says, hard bluish, white light are scouts. So the alien says the ones that are hard bluish are white lighted are scouts, solid. Scouts curious about the last war, able to detect electromagnetic fields in equipment, and so keep themselves at a stage of molecular dissolution, i.e. stasis. Now that's something interesting to pay attention to. Apparently the electromagnetic fields disrupts their anti-gravitational devices like in Roswell, so they can detect the electromagnetic fields and so keep themselves at a stage of molecular dissolution, i.e. stasis. So if you go on YouTube and you see people photographing or videoing UFO sightings, there seems to be sometimes a dark hole appearing in the sky, and out of it comes a UFO, or into it goes a UFO and disappears. So I suppose this is this stasis state they're talking about. That they could observe yet get hurt by whatever weapons we had. So if they stay in stasis, they can observe us. We can't see them. Interesting? Knowingly or unknowingly, some of our electronics equipment could have had an odd effect upon the functionality of the LM observer scout ships and caused some consternation to the LMs. A peaceful, naively curious bunch of inadvertent havoc wreckers, as you'll ever see, Jemmy. So that's what the alien says about the LMs. A peaceful, naively curious bunch of inadvertent havoc wreckers, as you'll ever see, Jemmy. Jessup Morris says, with that distinction in mind, let us suppose that the Foos either have intelligence or are remotely directed by intelligence. That they are a manifestation of some intelligence activity seems the most logical compromise. So as can be imagined, you know, probably our military, and the people in charge of the military, and if we remember this book, and we know a little bit about what's going on in the world right now, and watched my previous videos and other people, these people who are initiated into the secret mystery schools of Babylon, these elitists belonging to these CIA and Council of Foreign Relations and Bohemian Grove and Bilderberger groups, Club of Rome, Zionists, Jesuits, Vatican, the people who run our world, are probably privy to the truth here. They probably know the truth. So what are we dealing with? And what does that have to do with sky spraying, HARP transmitters, FEMA camps, readying for World War III, depopulation? Does somebody plan on inhabiting Earth? I realize this is far-fetched and a crazy conversation, but I think it should be asked. I'd hate to think we humans are such fools we never see it coming. But they are giving us lots of drugs, the people, whether it's legal medications or illegal drugs, alcohol, downtown city parties, and keeping everybody slightly out of the their mental awareness level. Everybody's lethargic. That's what they call zombies. Dumbed down Americans. We've all heard these terms. Fluoride in the water, fluoride in the toothpaste. Who knows? Fluoride in the water, in the food. What else is in the food? And they are giving out dangerous vaccines. And other things that seem to be harming we the people. Cell phones, radio towers. This stuff is off the chart. The references throughout history to strange lights in the sky and burning objects fleeing through the air are common knowledge. Alien says, quite so. The following letter to the editor of Faith magazine, March 1951, bears careful scrutiny. I ask you to recall the rays we suggested in Marks and Footprints, the devil footprints we went over earlier. It was 1:45 a.m. on the night of January 1949. Sleep eluded me, and I was standing at my window drinking in the beauty of a dimly moonlit landscape. Not a creature was stirring, nor a breath of wind. The alien says, if this happens, cover yourself with earth. Jemmy. Alright, Jessup says, fuzzy gray shadow that was not a shadow ballooned into a disk of clear white light approximately 3 feet in diameter. It lay there for fully 2 minutes. Then suddenly, contracting into a brilliant orange-tinted stream 5 to 6 inches wide, flowed swiftly over the snow towards my window, and to all appearances exploded soundlessly against the stone foundation of the intervening front porch. So she's up late at night, and she sees a disc of clear white light, approximately 3 feet in diameter. It slides along the ground, brilliant orange tinted stream, 5 or 6 inches wide, flowed swiftly over the snow towards my window, exploded soundlessly against the stone foundation of the intervening front porch. Several tongues of scintillating red and blue flame spurted a few inches above the 2.5 high-foot wainscoting on the porch. That was all. So what to make of these reported instances by people? Jessup says, we have another interesting account of a recent visit by a fireball which warrants attention. It was reported by Gordon Hackberth of Seattle, Washington. Suddenly something made him look up. The mirror reflected a ball of orange-red fire coming toward him through the open window. A ball of orange-red fire coming toward him through the open window. There was a blinding flash and a loud report. The ceiling light went out, and Birch was knocked to the floor. In a daze, he reached for the foot of his metal bed to haul himself upright. A searing pain shot up his arm. Later, it was diagnosed that he had received second-degree burns. So something must have charged up his metal bed. When he touched it, he got a shock. The alien says, don't know if bulb exploded. Later, hyperactivation by force field on molecules could have caused burns or pure energy implosion. Bounces back, effects secondary explosion, thus burns, etc. So there's those nasty force field weapons they have, I guess. In the corner of his room, the contents of the wastebasket blazed furiously. Beneath the window, a piece of fireproof Samsonite luggage was charred and smoking. The cabinet of 2 radios was burned. The sill of the window through which the fireball had entered was black and too hot to touch. The alien says, yes, all the above are scientifically explainable They are reactions to force and energy, wild and tame. All right, one more. On this page, the officer in the process of writing a traffic violation ticket, 3 blocks away, had looked up, seen the orange ball flash across the sky in an arc from a southerly direction and enter the window. So a cop saw the orange ball coming across the sky and go in the window. In the Bremerton Naval Hospital the next day, the bewildered Birch, his arms swathed in bandages, still suffered from shock. Moving on. The alien says, the terrifying thing about fireballs is that when human and fireball face each other, the one recognizes a panicked intelligence in the other and is thus terrified in reciprocal emotions. A fireball is either LM or SM, who, like that process that being burned the ancient arcs has had a malfunction. So these beings can be seen as fireballs. All right, back to the book. Accident or caused of one or all of his induced fields and thus burns. So are these entities real? What do they have to do with human history? Are they involved in, apparently according to this material they are, the building of the ancient monuments, and hence would be connected to the symbols on the ancient monuments, which are the same symbols used by the secret mystery school of Babylon folks who are into Luciferian satanic worship. Just saying, using my God-given brain, reading this stuff, listening. In Marseilles, during October 1898, an adolescent girl was seated in a table when suddenly a spherical shape of fire darted into the room, paused in the corner furthest from her, and gradually moved toward her along the floor. Terror-stricken, she drew back against the wall. Then abruptly, it changed its course, circled her several times, and shot towards the ceiling. It flung itself at a paper-covered stovepipe hole and burned a ring in it on its way up the chimney. Minutes later, a loud crash shattered the chimney top. So you get a round ball of fire come into the room, dart across the floor, zoom up into the chimney, and it explodes. A similar occurrence was reported in Paris, July 5th, 1852, in the shop of a tailor. This time the fireball crawled over the windowsill, into the room, came at the man in a floor-skimming action. Horrified, he retreated as the globe of blazing light climbed to a height of his face. Crazy. Moving on here. Suddenly there appeared a globe of fire, the size of an apple, near the top of the poplar tree. We saw it descend branch by branch, and then down the trunk. It moved along the courtyard very slowly, picking its way, and came through to the door where the 2 children stood. One of them touched it. Immediately a terrible crash shook the entire farm to its foundation. So one of the children touched it. Immediately a terrible crash shook the entire farm to its foundation. The children were thrown back uninjured, but 11 of the oxen in the barn were felled dead. In the town of Gray, July 7th, 1886, a luminous ball from 30 to 40 centimeters in diameter jumped to the roof of a home and ripped off the corner. It rebounded to the home's outside stairs, crashing the slates. Still it retained its shape, crawled into the midst of the group of passengers by whom had stopped to watch the queer sight. These persons in a body took off down the road. The perverse object seemed to pursue them momentarily, then it vanished without a sound. The alien says, must have hit a vortex or been saved somehow. Moving on, Mr. Lawrence Roth, director of Blue Hill Observatory in 1903, I must be getting tired of speaking, was visiting Paris on September 4th of that year, 1903. At 10 p.m. he happened to be looking toward the Eiffel Tower from the road point at Camps Elsines. The tower was suddenly struck by white lightning. Simultaneously, he spied a flaming sphere edging downward to the second platform. Roth claimed the ball was about a yard in diameter, about 3 feet, and that it covered some 100 yards in a matter of seconds, and then completely vanished. The alien says, it is very interesting to note that these reports are from the general area where a great deal of UFO activity was reported in late 1954, localization, selectivity. So that was Jessup's statement, but highlighted by the alien. And the alien does add a note here. Yes, no doubt about it. Another one. A fireball at Hammersley Fork floated down through the roof, exploded in the cabin, blowing out windows and doors at midday on December 9th, 1951. Another one came down 50 yards east of the post office there and vanished just before reaching the ground on January 9th, 1952. A week later, another one came down just at dusk at Cross Fork, 8 miles from Hammersley Fork, and vanished just before touching the ground. On January 23, again at dusk, a fireball floated down into the woods about 200 feet from a car of Mr. Doyle's schooner and vanished just before reaching the ground. Just a curious thought I had while reading Rabbi Marvin Antelman's book that I've said many times in previous videos. To eliminate the opate, Volume 1 and Volume 2. And opate means believe in God, prayer, faith. So we are spiritual beings in these biological bodies. And for whatever reason, these Luciferian Satanists, Illuminati, Freemasons, Jesuits, Zionists, Secret Mystery School of Babylon cults all over the world, Rosicrucians, Hollywood, they don't want us to pray. And then you talk about these beings that pop out of thin air, fireballs chasing people, flying saucers, using attractors, picking people up off the ground, making planes disappear. Just makes you wonder, what is this other world where you go into stasis and you go into it, another dimension? And then remembering Rabbi Marvin Antelman's book, and in one chapter he mentions Hitler's diary, where Hitler and some people abducted a gypsy man in Munich, Germany, laid him on an altar to sacrifice him, while a young girl laid in an adjoining altar of the cult. The phone ringeth. Got to do my day job to pay the bills. So anyways, in Hitler's diary, they did this satanic ceremony, killing the gypsy man, in an effort to bring forth an interdimensional being, and I'm reading these things here, which apparently did appear, but failed to impregnate the girl on the altar to bring forth some superior beings. Like I said, I think all this stuff is tied together. So moving on here, more about fireballs and situations. Mr. John Bessor, a very careful and reliable investigator, made a special trip of inspection in the vicinity of Brown Mountain near Morganton, North Carolina. I've been to that area and personally saw the mysterious lights reported there. It's not too far from where I live. I wanted to go there at night sometime and check it out. Nevertheless, the lights were observed by him over a period of several days and nights. They appeared to move at will, to have violation. So they were appearing and moving as if they were intelligent. Alright, another day, continuing this video. It's nice outside, so I thought I'd switch the atmosphere. Finish this chapter on the case for UFOs. Alright, reading on, page 146. We note the common traits of maneuverability, transparency, color, and evidence of intelligent manipulation, not to mention the ability to appear and disappear at will, as did the saucers over Washington in 1952. A lot of people don't know about the UFOs flying over Washington. 1952. David Packer in Worcestershire saw an illumination which he thought was the aurora, and proceeded to photograph it. What he saw was a broad, diffused series of cloud-like illuminations. His photograph in English Mechanic showed a large luminous disk of sphere over the aurora illuminations. The only possible explanation in that case is based on their conventional knowledge that this thing, invisible to the eye, was luminous in that part of the spectrum to which the plate in the camera was sensitive, probably ultraviolet, as infrared plates are not then available. They took a picture, and apparently a gigantic UFO sphere, gigantic ball, that you couldn't see with the naked eye, but you could see it with an infrared camera. The alien says, each pilot of a F ship receives the ability to become molecular dissolute after he has been so done by his own ship's fields enough time. Further, when he has been imbued with this ability, he sometimes loses control of it due to too many repetitions or flows in the natural fields or breakdown of ship's fields. LMs are coming closer and closer to solving how to totally prevent themselves from catching fire, perhaps have by now succeeded, I hope fervently. Which is interesting. When we started this book, we were talking about the Philadelphia experiment, where they turned on those microwave transmitters all over the U.S. ship Eldridge, and it disappeared and reappeared different places around the planet. And when it reappeared back in Philadelphia Harbor, or wherever it reappeared, some of the crew members were half in and half out of the bulkhead, and some of the ones that were not caught in the steel, their bodies, later on in their life, days or months, they would actually catch on fire, spontaneous combustion. So apparently going into another dimension and trying to get back into this dimension can have some serious consequences. Whether it's the Philadelphia experiment and the transmitters to create some kind of time tunnel, or these aliens using their technologies. True or not, I'm not trying to ask that question. I'm reading this material and pondering some theories. And then I read other books and I listen to what they say. You know, like with Rabbi Marvin Antelman and Hitler's diary of abducting a Munich gypsy, sacrificing him to bring forth some kind of interdimensional being to impregnate a girl on the altar. Do they have something to do with each other? Does this have something to do with aliens, UFOs, the Philadelphia Eldridge disappearing and showing up in different parts of the planet? I think so. Things in the Bible, manifestations, witchcraft, the Illuminati, the Kabbalah, the people who rule our planet, the mystery school of Babylon with the initiates. What do they know? What initiation did they go through? Why are they our presidents and senators and representatives and CEOs of large corporations, and some of them meeting at the Bohemian Grove and having a big owl with a fire in the belly, throwing a baby into it with something called a cremation of care, dressing in long robes and shipping in gay men for sex? What is reality? What's going on? That's all I'm trying to answer. What the heck is going on? Moving on here, my little commentary. United States since 1947, lights like a long cluster of stars, obscured by a thin film of mist, were reported. Later, this thing is said to have taken on the shape and appearance of a vertically suspended iron bar heated to an orange-colored glow, but the initial description is that of light in formation. Jessup says that. The alien says, ship standing vertically is signaling help to all in vicinity. So, that's what the alien says in response to what Jessup described was happening. Jessup says, I submit that all strange lights reported throughout history and today are either from UFOs themselves or reflections of them. They may be UFOs. Jessup says something else that the alien highlighted here. This is not to inscribe malicious intent to UFOs for accidental shooting of a hunter, does not condemn the sorrowed friend who fired the shop, much less the distant manufacturer. That fireballs are released at all is, again, probably sheer experimentation on the part of the UFOs. The alien says, not so. The burnings must be ejected, or the ship will catch fire in control pit. Jessup says, an intelligent boy was trudging along the highway at night near Palestine, Texas. A woman was riding in the same direction on a horse. The boy reappeared in Palestine that night, out of breath and very pale. He said he saw a ball of fire coming out of the sky and strike the woman and set her ablaze. So the townspeople went looking to see what really happened. They found the woman lying on the ground with all her clothing burned, but with enough life in her to tell that she had been struck in the breast by a ball of fire. The horse was found with his mane singed. The woman died the next day. So these are documented cases. What are we to think? The alien says, such fireballs could also be a new method of execution of outlaws or method of disposal for older people. I do know that the arks were burned. So these big ships that the aliens had were called arks. That scouts can also burn in this fashion. I dread these fireballs, and I believe the U.S. Navy may also have formed some out of human material, 1943, 1944. That would be the Philadelphia experiment ship. And some of those crewmen did explode spontaneously and caught on fire. The alien also says, I do not fear the LMs or their enemies themselves, but I dread in a terror-filled hellish dreadfulness the least imitation of the appearance of a fireball, that is not inanimate, and thus clearly more burnings of and from a coat upon exterior parts of the ship. All electricity gathers a coat, and this must be disposed of, else functionality of ship and fields is impaired. This I understand, but not a burning personality in terror. It verges too much upon the inhuman, the horrible. So again, I ask, is there more to reality than what we know? Just something to ponder, and what do the people who rule our planet know, and things that maybe we citizens ought to know? Page 148, Legends. Appearances from or disappearances into the sea indicate only an ability to make use of the fluid medium of seawater. This is Jessup speaking, highlighted by the alien. This leads to an assumption that UFOs live naturally and easily in space. The alien says, no, not easily. The little men are known to have gills, just as all men before birth have gills too. So I suppose before we humans are born, inside the mother's womb, which is full of fluid, is he saying we had some kind of gills to breathe? Moving on, Jessup says, after considering that the space structures, or UFOs, spend most of their time in line between Earth and the Sun, it has been suggested that some of the ancient sun worship, here we go with this Mystery School of Babylon, the symbols all over the hieroglyphics in Egypt, and the Rosicrucian, Freemason, witchcraft, Zionist, Jesuits, corporate symbols everywhere with the blazing sun, and the pyramid, and the eye. So sun worship may have originated in the condition that some godlike beings may have come from UFOs, which were said to be in the sun because of this alignment of the neutral, and that perhaps the dead boats for celestial flight, which were buried with the Egyptian kings, may have been symbolic in the UFO flight. Morris Jessup theorizing. And it was a little bit of it was highlighted by these aliens. Morris Jessup says some more here. We repeat that it is relatively unimportant whether we decide that civilization was brought to us from space, perhaps from the exploded planet between Mars and Jupiter, or whether it reached space from terrestrial development in a previous upsurge of civilization. So Jessup says it really doesn't matter that there was a ancient civilization, but it doesn't matter whether they came from outer space to here, or they developed here and went to outer space. Perhaps a little less strain on our sensibilities to assume that space life, especially if limited to the Earth-Moon system, originated on Earth. Our two greatest mental hazards at the moment are to overcome the blows of our racial ego and to free ourselves from the idea that UFOs and space life, now reaching our cosmicness, necessarily come from a planet. Their presence in nearby space regions is improbability of lesser order and has little about it which is difficult of acceptance. So more of Jessup theorizing who these entities might be. There is much to make us believe that this extraordinary thing, which we call civilization today, is nothing but flickering flamelets rekindled from almost extinct embers of civilization, the antiquity of which is undreamed of by modern archaeologists. And we all know there are ancient monuments all over the planet. Even in the mountains in Ecuador, there are caves so large that were cut out, glazed walls, that you could park a 727 jet in there. And the Andes Mountains are pretty high. But inside the caves, according to Eric von Donovich and others, there are steps and other living quarters all the way down to the Pacific, under the Pacific, and rising on an offshore island. And apparently, like the Hopi Indians and many other places all over the planet, it was these ancient entities that helped a lot of natives all over the planet build facilities underground or in mountains to survive the Great Flood. Just saying. And so that's what Jessup is theorizing. The alien says, the man is right. So what? Alright, moving on what Jessup says. The Hawaiians claim to have known about flying saucers for 1,000 years. And even to have a name for them, Alkulili, or flying spirits. They describe these flying spirits as appearing in many shapes and colors, just as they are sighted today. The balls of fire, cones, and saucer-shaped disc. Document case from England AD 1290. It is one of the best reports on things in space that we call UFOs. A Mr. A.X. Chumley, a British scholar, recently found a Latin document at Bylan Abbey in Yorkshire describing a strange aerial object that terrified the monks in AD 1290. So 700 years ago. The document refers to a flat, round, silver object called a discus, which flew over the monastery, exciting maximum terror among the brethren. The alien says, yes, LMs introduced discus throwing while trying to explain the method of haphazard arrival in Thessalonia to the blockheaded locals who thought it was a new game. The alien also says, the further back in time, the less note is taken of plain bare facts. Thus, antiquity of obfuscates reality. Alright, more of what Jessup says. A wave of civilization covering the world before the flood. A lot of us know that there was a civilization before the flood, whether you call it Lemuria, Atlantis. The monuments are there for us to see. No matter how far we push the periphery of our quest, we still find a ready-made civilization. We have to admit human intellectual antiquity of, to us, fantastic and unbelievable vastness. So even with the people in India, in the Hindus, their history, their paintings, their artwork identifies UFOs quite a bit. Could these superfolk be space dwellers? Could they be tending us as sheep are tended? Are we actually owned? Could the UFOs be their abode? The alien says, gets a little wild here, but he does dare face things no other archaeologist ever has. Remember, Jessup was found in his car in Florida with a pipe from the exhaust pipe of his car into the window, taped up, and he died. He was killed, a lot of people believe. Alright, moving on with this. On June 19, 1801, a great body, moon-like, but larger with a dark mark across it, appeared over Hull, England. So a great body like the moon, but larger, at about midnight. It devolved into 5 bodies, all brilliant, which faded away, leaving a very bright sphere. A bluish light was around it all the while. The phone ringeth. I got to do my day job, pay the bills. Moving on here. Something that looked like an ordinary cloud, several miles long, seemed to take fire, burning with a bluish flame, lasting 15 minutes and twice repeated for short intervals. Alien says, mothership inductor left running while discharging scouts, then ran off overcharge. So apparently, like static electricity, I guess, builds up on these big ships. If you've ever seen a volcano going off, all kinds of electricity, thunderstorms, electricity. Just saying, something interesting to ponder. Mothership inductor left running while discharging scouts, then ran off overcharge. Anyways, back to Jessup. An elliptical sphere rose and fell over Edinburgh on June 21, 1787, and disappeared behind clouds. December 26, 1785, Edinburgh was, at 9 o'clock p.m., illuminated as bright as day. So at 9 at night, it was illuminated like it was daytime, by a sphere with a sort of cone-shaped attachment. This was seen in a number of distant places. The alien says cone was measure marker on tracker scout ship. So if this stuff is real, and they talk about pending doom, the apocalypse, Planet X, pole shift, earthquakes, and we know about sky spraying, HARP systems, 911, overthrowing all the countries in the Middle East, where all these ancient monuments are. What does it have to do with each other? Anyways, back to Jessup here. Jacob B's diary records a comet that appeared at 4:45 p.m. on December 20th, 1689, first in ye form of half a moon, very fiery, and afterwards did change itself into a fiery sword and ran westward. So strange things in the sky. Throughout the 19th century, there are many reports of explosions cannoning and crashing in the sky. Holby, Kepler, and other scientists acknowledge the veracity of these reports but never offer real solutions. The alien says, Mother, so I guess he means mothership, dreadnought and scout fighters with force shields, all full blast total. Compressed material or frozen material hits atmosphere and is pronto. Unfrozen results in mild explosions. When area suddenly froze, it causes implosions of air. That's what the alien says. Jessup reports, Kepler reported, a burning globe appeared at sunset on November 17th, 1623, visible all over Germany and much of Austria. A whole series of observations of illuminated crosses, burning globes, horrid celestial crashing noises, beams of fire, discolored sun, sun dogs, and mock suns is reported from 1501 to 1557. So you had 50 years with a lot of these observations. The alien says, chuckle, ha, it was laughing. Alright, moving on here. The Chronicles of Basel, 1478, recount divers kinds of crosses, and fiery bowls fell to the ground from the sky, leaving tokens behind. The alien says, yes, may still be laying there. Jessup says, in the early winter of 1387, a fire in the sky was seen many times, like a burning and revolving wheel, a fire in the sky. The alien says, imploded and burning ship frame. Some experimentals were faulty and actually burned whole afloat. Is this stuff true? Jessup moves on. He says, this weird report is dated AD 1322. 7 p.m. there was seen in the sky over Uxbridge, England, a pillar of fire of the size of a small boat, pallid and livid in color. It rose from the south, crossed the sky with a slow and grave motion, and went northward. Out of the front of the pile of fervent red flame burst forth, with great beams of light. Many beholders saw it in collision, and there came sounds of fearful combat and sounds of crashes. The alien says, Buja. B-U-J-A. Alright, Jessup says, Matthew of Paris says on July 24th, AD 1239, these are just reports that are documented in newspapers, magazines, books, throughout the ages that Morris Jessup researched. A great star appeared. It was like a torch rising from the south and flying on both sides. And of it there was emitted in the height of the sky a very great light. It turned toward the north in the Avery region, not quickly, nor indeed with speed, but exactly as if it wished to ascend to a place in the air. But when it arrived at the apparent middle of the firmament in our northern hemisphere, it left behind its smoke with sparks. The alien says, an old ark being demolished. Jessup goes on, March 20 AD 1168, a globe of fire was seen moving to and fro in the air. So a big globe was on fire, moving to and fro in the air. Alien says, only a few old arks now remain. Most are way stations. There are 2 great arks, 1 new. And the next other alien says, for Earth duty. So it has been reported that past presidents, after World War II, where we set off 2 nuclear explosions in Japan, we started to have a high occurrence of UFO sightings. And apparently, past presidents have met with these aliens and made deals, according to some of my other UFO books, deals where they could abduct people for some kind of experimentation, which apparently got out of hand, if you study the UFO world. So what does it all mean? And what if our government is in contact with these beings, and they do plan a huge depopulation agenda using sustainability, biodiversity, global warming, global cooling, climate change, terrorism, plagues, droughts, economic crashes, World War III. What's really going on? These world wars didn't happen by accident. Moving on this book. AD 1104, burning torches, fiery darts. Flying fires were often seen in the air in this year, 1104. They flew in the air and took away the light of the sun as if they had been clouds. The alien says, above ladder is excellent description of Grecian Mercury hat. That is just exactly what his hat and mayhap itself was designated from. Whatever a Grecian Mercury hat is. Jessup says, AD 1067, in this year people saw a fire that flamed and burned fiercely in the sky. 1067. It came near the earth, and for a little time brilliantly lit it up. Afterwards it revolved and ascended on high, and then descended into the sea. So this would have been at the beginning of the Crusades of the Pope and the kings of Europe, mustering all the citizens up and marching across the land north of the Mediterranean into Palestine and killing all the people and taking over the castles. 1067. Just an interesting observance what was going on at humankind when these things were going on. AD 936, in a clear sky, the sun was suddenly darkened red like blood. And also during the Crusades and other stuff in the Bible back then, some miraculous things did happen, as if they were alien ships in the sky. Just FYI, what really happened? The alien says, so the sun was suddenly darkened red like blood in 936. Alien says, when the chained cities moved all off the ark, no, for 2 seasons, old arks and boats being demolished. So apparently these aliens were living in these gigantic arks in the air, and they moved off of them to some chained cities under the Atlantic Ocean. Jessup says, AD 941, the sun had a terrible appearance for some time, and a stream like blood issued from it. Jessup says, AD 823, in summer, a piece of ice fell from the sky over Burgundy, France. It was 16 feet long, 7 feet broad, and 2 feet thick. Wow. And the alien says, ice for hangover. And the other alien says, yak, Y-A-K, whatever that means. AD 796, Roger of Wendover records that small globes were seen circling around the sun. 457, 1500 years ago, over Brittany, France, a blazing thing like a globe was seen in the sky. Its size was immense, and on its beams hung a ball of fire like a dragon, out of whose mouth proceeded 2 beams, one of which stretched beyond France and the other reached towards Ireland, and ended in fire-like rays. The alien says, S-ship, arc type, in battle, and force locked with LM's boats. So I guess the SMs and the LMs were in some kind of battle. AD 393, 400 years almost after Jesus. In the time of Theodosius, a sign like a hanging dove, Columbopendos, appeared in the sky. It burned for 30 days. The alien says, can't say, probably ship in distress, force locked. So what is these force locked, force fields? Going into stasis and out of stasis. What about the Philadelphia experiment when they turned on those microwave transmitters and the ship disappeared and reappeared several other places momentarily and people saw it, and then it did reappear where it started from, and people were half in and half out of the bulkhead. And the people who survived, some of them just right in front of people would just disappear, go back into stasis, into this other dimension. Again, I'm just curious with the people who run our planet. Remember, this series is Freemasonry and Satanism. What do they know? What are they hiding that we all should know? I read books and report. All right. 170 BC, before Christ, at Lunapun, on the Appleton Way, 16 miles from Rome, a remarkable spectacle of a fleet of ships was seen in the air. The alien says, mirage of boats on clouds. No record such a sized movement. 106 BC, a bird that flew in the sky and set houses on fire was seen over Rome. Interesting history. Alien says, S-ship, not LM, jammed cutter. So I guess these ships have some kind of cutters. They can cut rock. And apparently if it's jammed, it's setting all the houses on fire. 214 BC, the forms of ships were seen in the sky over Rome, 200 years before Jesus. In 220 BC, a clear light shone in the sky at Rome. The alien says 214 BC, probably just plain water boats, human. Water boats. 216 BC, at Pernanesti, 65 miles from Rome, burning lamps fell from the sky, and at Aperum, 42 miles east of Pernesti, a thing like a round shield was seen in the sky. The alien says, ship cleaning off coat, and obviously in a hurry too. I'm just trying to make a point here. Morris Jessup was a smart guy. Spent a good many years studying all this stuff. What are UFOs, aliens? He studied ancient history and wrote the book, and then some alien beings marked up his book and sent it to the Navy. And they contacted Morris Jessup and said, hey, what's with your book and somebody sending it marked up with all these notations? And Jessup looked at the notations and said, well, I've got a couple letters, where it says Allende letters, that somebody has been writing me, and that handwriting looks the same. And the person who was writing him was shaming him for, I guess, theorizing that there should be advanced research into the Philadelphia experiment. And Allende was saying, no way, man shouldn't have that kind of technology. It's too dangerous. Look what they're doing with the 2 nuclear bombs and all the things they're doing here in 2016. Apparently preparing for World War III and depopulation. Maybe Allende was right. Maybe the humans shouldn't have that technology. But then again, with the Freemasons, Illuminati, Jesuits, Zionists, and all these people into the mystery school of Babylon, putting obelisk in all our city squares, that's the phallic unit for the god Osiris, and all the other satanic Luciferian symbolism on TV shows, the Grammys, football halftime shows, the all-seeing eye on the dollar bill. Maybe they already know about this stuff. I keep saying this. Moving on, the Jessup says, 99 BC, there fell in different places a thing like a flaming torch, and it came suddenly from the sky. Towards sunset, a round object like a globe, or a round circular shield, took its path in the sky from east to west. That is as good a description of a saucer as any, says Jessup. The alien says, these describe the great activity in undersea building, to a small inference, of the chained cities, and to the SM's resistance to the LM's in the small war after the Great Return. So apparently when they came here to Earth to move into a big city under the Atlantic Ocean, it was called the Great Return. Are these beings still here? Go look up Rothschild's mansion and see the fountain out front and those aquatic beings in his fountain. And the other book I showed, Tex Mars, all those monuments all over the world on one of my previous videos. Or those gargoyles I've showed in previous videos on a downtown building here where I live. Are there some kind of creatures that are the real thinkers behind the Illuminati, Freemasons, and all the other mystery school of Babylon culprits ripping us off? Zionists, Jesuits, banksters, CEOs, Hollywood people, seriously taking advantage of we the people, assassinating kings and presidents in Central South America, Europe, Africa, and citizens dying. They created AIDS and other plagues. Just seems like the insanity on Earth is being caused by somebody. A little bit mentally deranged, I would say these people are, if they're people. Alright, moving on and finishing this. I only have one page here to go. In the year 22, third month of winter, 6th hour of day, the scribes of the house of life found it was a circle of fire that was coming in the sky. Its body 1 rod long and 1 rod large. So a circle of fire was coming in the sky. Now after some days had passed over those things, lo, they were more numerous than anything. So Jessup is just writing in his book some ancient documentation of what people saw. They were shining in the sky more than the sun to the limits of the 4 supports of heaven. Thereupon they, the fire circles, went up higher directed to the south. Fishes and volatiles fell down from the sky. It was a marvel never occurred since the foundation of this land. Wow, I was back there in 1504. The alien says, old Titmouse saw the Great Return. Because they were talking about the leader back then. Titmouse III in 1504 BC, in the Egyptian papyrus, this was written. So he witnessed the Great Return back in 1504. These aliens came back to planet Earth, I guess. A story you know very well. He saw group coat burnings of whole convoy. In Great Return, one ship paid call in Titmouse's townspeople, was honored and received graciously, even if at first somewhat fearfully, like sun worshippers, the world over. So we have these monuments the world over of these strange beings, as we all know. We got statues of them everywhere. The gargoyles on the buildings downtown Asheville, North Carolina. Creatures with hoods on. Interesting. Jessup moves on and says, as you can see from the translation, the flying saucers made their first appearances in the 22nd year of the reign of Titmouse III, about 3,500 years ago. This is Jessup's research. Two things have to be noticed. It left after a foul odor, and it was not making any noise. And I'm only reading my highlighted portions, so we'll get the book if you find this fascinating. Two things I have noticed. During their second appearance, they were very numerous and shining, and fishes and volatiles fell from the sky. Therefore, the king thought that the best thing to do to pacify the heart of Amun-Ra, Lord of the thrones of the two lands Egypt. Now remember, we're talking about the New Age and the New World Order. Ascension and all kinds of beings. Galactic Federation, if you've been researching any of this stuff. Palladian aliens. And a new god coming that's Luciferian satanic. Trying to destroy Christianity. So it just seems to me that with all this technology and beings that are interdimensional, it isn't any wonder what Jesus could do, and other prophets or leaders back then in history, they knew something that we all don't know now. And as I keep saying, it might behoove us to wake up. Okay, I gotta finish this up. In size, this UFO was said to be about 100 cubits, which is about 172 feet long. In any case, it was described as a fire circle, indicating its shape, and that flames were associated with it, as has so often been the case. As in our modern sightings, and if you go on any UFO reporting site right now, 2016, you will see people are recording sightings that a lot of the descriptions are like what I'm reading here. As in our modern sightings, there was sometimes one object, and sometimes a group or flock. They were shining, and by this it seems they can infer that they were luminous. The alien says, laminated metal covered by sheet diamond. Well, I was wrong. There's a little bit more. The records of Tibet, however, seem to be more complicated than those of Egypt and more ancient. Perhaps it is because the mountain fastness of Tibet and northern India have not been subject to the burnings and other destructive activities of Western civilization, which annihilated the libraries of the Egyptians and the Mayans. The alien says true. And as you know, if you've been watching my videos or other people, even when the Europeans went to Central and South America, like in Mexico City, which was around a gigantic lake, and they had this being they believed was a god and all that, the first thing the Crusaders did was went to the Shama's hut, I guess absconded with all the religious artifacts, killed the Shama, and then proceeded to start killing the natives and stealing the gold. But my point is, like the Library of Alexandria, these people from the Vatican and the kings and queens and their castles, they always wanted to destroy religious artifacts, knowledge. Why? Churchwood says that he came upon many records ranging back to at least 200,000 years. So when you went into the ancient caves of Shambhala in the Himalayas, in Tibet, China area, India area, between the two countries, they found records dating back 200,000 years. And one of his most fascinating finds relates to mechanical flight brought to India by the first settlers, and antiquity may be anything from 15,000 to 200,000 years, with the longer term the more likely. The alien says, not know Churchwood, if then he has seen so ancient rites, then he knew why we do not war, nor ever worry why each of us knows of day of death, and that we once rulers, then were slaves. So I guess they're saying once they were rulers, and now they're rulers, once they were slaves. Jessup says, here by mechanical flight, we most certainly mean something different, either by our lighter than air or heavier than air flight mechanisms of today, planes. That the flight of these millennium employed a type of power unknown today. Seems almost certain, whatever the source of that power was, that this power source worked on the same principle as levitation. Gravity nullification seems logical. It may be, too, that such a force of power does not lend itself to industry. The alien says it does. From lifeboat power is XXX, built scouts and so on up to great arcs. Another alien says getting too close for comfort. So I guess Morris Jessup was hitting the stuff on the nail here. Phraseology indicates lack of courage, not worry, Jemmy. Alright, now we got the last page. Alright, the last page. A Hindu manuscript of ancient origin says, when morning dawned, Rama, taking the celestial car which Pushpaka had sent him be Visha hand, stood ready to depart. Self-moving was this car. It was large and finely painted. It had 2 stories and many chambers with windows, and was draped with flags and banners. It gave forth a melodious sound, like a melody, as it coursed along its airy way. So it sounds like a jumbo jet, thousands of years ago. So Jessup researched, and he's printed some of this data in this book. More Jessup material. If the translation had been made by a person with technical training available in 1955, it would read like this. When dawn came, Rama took the flying machine with Pushpaka, had sent to him by Vishahand, and stood by to take off. This machine was self-propelled, large, and finely finished. It was a 2-decker with many compartments having windows, and was draped with flags and pennants. As the machine flew, it made a humming or droning sound. The alien says, no, had 2 equally shaped halves, looked up at from ground it seemed to be 2 parts as hereon. So apparently these people who are aliens or some entities in the know corrected Jessup's opinion about what was described. There is another Hindu manuscript dated 500 BC. Rawin, king of Ceylon, flew over the enemy's army and dropped bombs, causing many casualties. Eventually, Rawin was captured and slain, and his flying machine fell into the hands of the Hindu chieftain Ram Sandra. The alien says, no, not bombs, rocks or frozen air or coat burnings. Jessup says both of these manuscripts seem to have been taken from the same temple records at Ihoda and refer to a time at least 20,000 years ago. The alien says during time before the ice. So apparently there was a serious ice age here on Earth. What that had to do with the Great Flood, I don't know. But I'll keep reading books and researching and sharing what I learn. So we're almost finished here. It is from this material that we have come to the conclusion that space flight is not a new phenomenon, but a rather lost art. The alien says, that I can remember. Jessup says, therefore, I strongly recommend the legislative be enacted, that legislation be enacted, to assign qualified researchers to the field of gravity. There and not in atoms we shall discover the secret of the true flight into space. The alien says a circular pattern of bar magnets, 342 of them, have no weight if they are attached to a common sheet of metal. So I remembered it as 264. But it's 342 bar magnets in a circular pattern on a sheet of metal, make it weightless. Be an interesting experiment. In short, they float in the air, all 900 pounds of them. The alien also says, in center, I wish were one drive inductor. And the other alien says, boy, oh boy. So there you have it. Some more information documented by a scientist, an astronomer, a professor, Morris Jessup. What to make of all this material he collected over the years? And again, if we can remember what I've been saying, my concern is that the government, the powers that be, which apparently are coming from the Skull and Bones, Freemasons, Rosicrucians, witchcraft, kings and queens, Jesuits, Zionists, all these elites who have been ruling the world, causing all these great wars and death and mayhem to we people. Apparently no more than they're sharing with us, and they have ill intent towards our goodwill and health. So I do research, and I share my research, with the quest being, I'm trying to find out what the heck is going on. When I started this whole thing many years ago. Thank you for watching my video, Rick Miracle reporting.